Jane, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and what you do and how you got into the field?
Sure. So my name is Jane Lee, and I am a trust and safety architect at Sift. We are a fraud prevention platform powered by machine learning, and we work with a wide range of customers, ranging from dating apps to quick service restaurants, McDonald's, Twitter, Uphold, a broad spectrum of different types of companies. My role is pretty unique. I have not heard of the term trust and safety architect at other companies. But basically, you can think of our team as the subject matter experts when it comes to fraud. And so a big part of my role is to understand new and emerging fraud trends and make sure that our customers are informed, as well as that our product is working for our customers. Prior to joining Sift, I was at Facebook for a little over 5 years working on spam. And spam at Facebook covers a very wide range of different problem areas. And then prior to that, I spent about a year at Square working on payments fraud. So that's my I guess portfolio of fraud that I've been working in over the past 8 or 9 years.
So, was there some particular event in your life or family's life that got you interested in working in fraud, or was it the CSI show?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. So not anything personal. When I was in grade school, I was obsessed with every single cop show on network television. So CSI, all of the CSIs, all of the Law and Orders, all of the NCISs, and I really wanted to be a detective. And then I learned how dangerous it was, and I was like, so I like to think of what I do right now as kind of the detective work, but behind the scenes and, under the safety of just tech. So yeah, it wasn't a particular personal event, more so just I think an interest in investigations. Yeah, I actually was a private investigator. I didn't mention this. I was a private investigator for a brief period before my start in tech. And then prior to that, I went to go to law school, but we all know how that turned out. So,
I assume you're not a lawyer then.
No.
So let's talk about pig butchering. So I want to know, what is it and how in the world did the terminology arise?
Yeah, so pig butchering is actually, so let me explain what it is first. Pig butchering is, we've all heard and know of like the old school romance scams or Nigerian prince scams where the end goal is to try to get someone to wire over some money. I describe in layman's terms pig butchering scam as romance scam on steroids because there is a crypto component to it, a crypto investment component to it, and the technological sophistication of the scammers. And so basically the scammers bait their victims, or their targets, I should say, their targets on largely dating apps, but on other platforms like WhatsApp, actually any platform with any messaging component, I would say is at risk. But my investigative work was on the dating apps. So they'll find their targets on the dating apps, quickly move the target over to an encrypted messaging app. So in my case, it was WhatsApp. Of course, that adds that extra layer of anonymity for them to avoid detection. And, that's when they start, actually from the beginning, they always position themselves as successful business people. Mm-hmm. They have achieved financial freedom. They want to travel the world, retire by age 40. And they really position themselves as that. And they start by really romancing the target. Quickly, they use tactics like love bombing, which I don't know if anyone is into like behavioral psychology, but love bombing is not a healthy thing. So where you're just overwhelming the person, showering them with compliments and things like that. It's not really genuine love. And then they move over to manipulating their targets. And so they'll start talking about, hey, you should really start investing. Look how much I'm making with crypto. You're missing out. You could have made this money. And that's really to drive a sense of urgency So to
Yeah.
really try to get the individual to send over the money fast. And then what ends up happening is that they will actually, so for some periods of time, the target may be able to withdraw the funds. So it's actually tangible. So they see, hey, I'm making huge returns in a very short period of time. So the money and the profit feels tangible. And then ultimately there's a tax or a fee or something to have to withdraw that money. And at that point, I think most people quickly realize that they have been scammed, or they get ghosted by the person that they were interacting with. I didn't answer your question on the term pig butchering. That is not, thankfully, coined by myself. That is actually what the scammers call it. And basically, pig butchering, they refer to their victims as pigs that they plumpen up, they fatten up for the ultimate slaughter. I think I might have lost you, or I might have been lost for a second.
I hear. There you are. You're back now.
Okay.
Are you back?
I'm back.
Okay.
But your screen is frozen. Oh, there we go.
There we go. It's a dramatic pause. And good for editors. They're amazing at taking care of this sort of thing.
Oh yeah, they just see the flat line. It's like, okay, that's where to cut. Yeah.
So let's go back. And so the pig butchering terminology was devised by the criminals themselves.
Yeah, the scammers themselves. So they're victims. They refer to as the pigs, and they're plumpeting them up with the compliments. It's completely morbid.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they lead them to the slaughter, at which point in which they drain them of all their funds and walk away with, in some cases, millions of dollars.
Yeah, I've interviewed several people that have been the targets and unfortunately the victims of romance scams.
Yeah.
Without the crypto component to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did your investigation of it, how did that go down? How did you how did you get to be a target, so to speak?
Yeah. So it was first brought to my attention. So I mentioned at Sift, we do work with a number of dating apps or websites. And it was first surfaced in our network of dating apps. And once I started investigating, I being the occasional dating app user myself, I quickly recognized that these accounts looked very familiar. And it was something that me as a dating app user, I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I was noticing a lot of the same type of accounts. I couldn't put my finger on what it was though. But once I did see kind of what was going on behind the scenes, I knew that this was, anytime you see too much of like the same thing online, it's probably, there's a high chance that it's fraudy.
Yeah.
And so, being the curious, I guess, person, I mentioned I wanted to be a detective at one point. And so I really just wanted to know the inner workings of it. And so I rolled up my sleeves and I downloaded every single major dating app available on the App Store. I even recruited one of my single girlfriends who was on the apps to help me out. But yeah, so that's how I set myself up as bait. And it wasn't long before I realized it was very easy to, I guess, bait some scammers myself.
That's unfortunately, that's really unfortunate that it was so easy to already, just by creating the accounts that you were able to get people to start reaching out to you in an inauthentic way.
Mm-hmm.
So what about, having looked at a bunch of the accounts, what was it prior to any type of communication that kind of, what were these similarities between the accounts that caught your attention?
Yeah, so at the time, they were a lot of very attractive looking objectively attractive looking Asian men. And so they initially, and they've since changed our MO. So which is why I say at the time, their faces, all of their pictures looked extremely photoshopped. I even tried doing a reverse Google image search to see if they were using some stock images or some, models that I didn't know about. That didn't yield anything. So I do believe they were either creating these fake, AI generated profiles, or they were stealing from existing people's social media accounts. So initially, very, very like your everyday person does not look like, I look like this with a lot of lighting and, but your everyday person doesn't look like this. Very curated. Their responses to some of the prompts that you're asked on dating apps were all very similar. Again, all talked about financial freedom, all talked about their dreams being to travel with their wife and family. They all looked and sounded the same. They had very generic job titles. So, their job title will say entrepreneur at this location or CEO at this location. So that was the I would say V1 of the MO. They have since diversified quite literally in terms of the types of images they're using. You now have CEOs from Germany, from all over the world. And then I believe because the answers to the prompts have started to make a little more, they used to make no sense at all. Like they wouldn't answer the question even. It would be a completely unrelated answer. They have since changed that. And what I think they're doing is they're either paying more attention to that as it's getting more exposed, or they've started copy and pasting from other existing profiles.
Yeah, to me, that's probably the scarier thing is when they're, the human mind when you're creating a bunch of fake things, and this even happens in accounting fraud, is people are really bad at generating random numbers, and so accountants that are stealing money when they're creating fake records in the ledger will use surprisingly consistent numbers that are not that just kind of stand out over time of, gee, there's an awful lot of transactions ending in 33 cents, 37 cents.
It looks too clean.
It's not normal. And it's like, there's a lot of that. So I assume that would be the same way if you're creating a bunch of fake dating profiles, is you just start answering, I'm creating 100 accounts today. I'm going to create them. I love to travel with my wife and kids. I can't wait to go somewhere with you just get the same thing over and over and over again because we're just not creative people. But if they're copying and pasting from random accounts, it's going to be harder to detect that sort of thing.
Absolutely. Actually, that's really interesting. I have not, accounting fraud is one of the types of fraud I guess I haven't worked in yet. So that's really interesting to hear. But again, I agree that people are creative, but not that creative, where you can generate these random strings of numbers without showing any sort of patterns.
And so I guess from the technical background, is it easy to technically identify these accounts, or or is it getting more and more complicated over time?
I think it's getting more complicated. The actors behind it are becoming more and more sophisticated. And so, for example, IP address can be a good signal when you're trying to assess whether, hey, does this person's IP actually match their location they're claiming to be from, or things of that sort. What I've noticed with this particular scam is that they know what IPs belong to specific ISPs, internet service providers, and they will use an emulator to look like they're using a T-Mobile IP address. Another part of what my team and I do is we kind of scour the dark web and deep web forums. And so, private Telegram forums, things that are credentials being sold on the dark web. We don't buy any of it, but, we just to understand what's going on. And I have seen a file of IP addresses, and they're like, hey, you should use these IP addresses. They're reputable. They belong to reputable sources. So from that perspective, for the naked human eye, that becomes really hard to tell at face value what's going
Yeah.
on. But I did mention that Sift is primarily a machine learning platform, and so that's where if you have the right technology to do this high volume data ingestion and has the algorithms to do something with it, that's where I think the machines, I hate saying it this way, but that's where the machines have the advantage over us people, right?
Yeah.
So if a content moderator is looking at it, says, hey, okay, it looks like they're based in Los Angeles and they're a Verizon user, and that all checks out. But hey, what if 1,000 other accounts are doing the exact same thing and sending the exact same type of messages? It becomes harder to detect without the right tooling.
I mean, that's the neat thing about machine learning and working with high volume dating apps, is that there's a lot of data to work with, and machines are incredibly good at spotting patterns in the data that we don't necessarily see.
Yeah, exactly.
And so is that kind of the reason why these scammers work so quickly to get people off of those platforms?
Yeah, that's actually, I wanted to elaborate on that, so I'm really glad that you asked that. So what they're trying to do is they're hedging their risks as well. So it one helps them avoid detection on any single platform. So as quickly as you move off the app onto another, they don't know what you're doing on the other app. And then two, I can't remember what was number two. Yeah, it's basically you're not committing a terms of service violation on any single platform, right? So
Yeah.
it's okay for me to ask someone, hey, I don't really use this app. Here's my number. Let's move over to WhatsApp. That's not a real policy violation.
Yeah.
But when you look at the aggregate of what they're doing on each platform, that's when you have a better picture of what's going on. And so, yeah, it's really, they're just hedging their risk of getting caught.
Okay, so here's the geeky behind the scenes questions, I guess. Does that give a company like Sift an advantage of, if you're working with, not to say that you are working, let's say, with WhatsApp, but if you're working with multiple platforms, that you can kind of see people moving from platform to platform?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is where the advantage of working with any large database essentially is. So fraud is, let me be careful how I say this. So fraud, yes, there's certain types of fraud that come from certain types of regions and impact certain types of users. However, fraud is largely agnostic, right? Meaning if they're targeting McDonald's, let's say I'm going to use McDonald's as an example because they're a Sift customer, they're going to probably target Carl's Jr. They're going to target Wendy's. They're going to use the same type of MO across the board. So
Yeah.
it's not really just impacting one business at an individual level. They're not just targeting one dating app. Like I mentioned, I downloaded every single dating app, and no one's safe. They're everywhere. And so the advantage of working with a company like Sift without coming off as too salesy is that if we've seen it once in our database, in our data, the rest of our customers or people that do work within our network will know about it ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of stay a step ahead of if you were to just do it on your own. The other thing too is that in my experience working with fraud in tech, it's the same, I would say like same dance, but different flavors of it. So you can kind of predict with how they're going to try to use all the different ways they're going to try to use a stolen credit card, all the different ways that they're going to try to send a spammy link. It might be slightly different, but you can kind of predict it. So I think that's where the advantage of working with a large set of existing data has over not using something like that.
Yeah, and that you're involved in a variety of platforms and a variety of technologies allows you to see things at a different perspective than maybe an employee at a dating app trying to deal with the same issues. They're only seeing what's going on in their own platform.
Yeah, exactly.
So, are there other things that let's get back to people that are being targeted? Are there other things that they should be watching out for? We talked about kind of these overly polished headshots, either weird text or the exotic successful entrepreneur traveling the world seems to be a really popular one.
Yeah.
Also, military vets seem to be a popular
Yeah.
personality.
I would say the military vets were, I got my first taste of romance scams at Facebook before crypto is what it is today. And I feel like that is when I saw the military vets more. And those images are usually reverse searchable. So first, I would say red flag would be moving the conversation over to an encrypted messaging app. And of course, the encryption, I think encryption's a kind of like a double-edged sword where, you want to honor privacy, but it makes, from a fraud perspective, it does add some huge challenges there. So moving over the conversation to WhatsApp, again, it's not the end all be all where, oh no, because this person asked me to move over to WhatsApp, they are fraud, but it's really like pieces of the puzzle. So the next thing that typically happens is the love bombing. And so is this person just bombarding you with compliments? My scammer boyfriend told me how beautiful I was, how they wanted to plan a trip to Osaka with me, these things that really it's from a professional perspective, I don't think I'm qualified to give dating advice, but I think as a person, it's moving a little too fast.
Yeah.
Right. For someone that you just met online a few weeks ago. The other red flag is they will find a bunch of reasons why they can't meet you in person. So they might even, they actually, this is one of the things that makes this scam different than the OG romance scams. They take time to understand the region that they're targeting. So one of the people that I was conversing with, I looked at the neighborhood that they reported they lived in, and I said, oh, hey, like, what are you doing this weekend? And they said that they were going to a local restaurant. So they did their research to actually find a restaurant that was believable to throw back at me. And
that's crazy.
It is. So they're doing their homework as well. So I said the love bombing, they'll find reasons why they can't meet you. Like I said, they might try to kind of assuage you by saying, hey, I can get on a video call and their video will be all blurry and but you won't actually see the face behind the phone, I guess.
Yeah.
I think COVID.
There's always technical difficulties.
There's always a reason, right? Your internet's not working.
I'm in the airport and the video and the bandwidth here is just horrible.
Yeah, I think COVID also gave them a good excuse at the height of lockdowns for why they couldn't meet. Like they're seeing their grandma, they can't see people at the time, at the moment. And then, throughout the entire journey or the lifeline of the scam, which actually takes place over a few months. It's not like a one hit. It's not just like hey, we're going to do this in a day and steal your money. They really cure these relationships. Throughout the process, they'll talk about investments, about how well they're doing. They'll send you screenshots of their bank accounts and also really flaunt an extravagant lifestyle. So my scammer boyfriend showed me pictures of him or whoever was the owner of these pictures on a yacht and doing a lot of luxurious things. So they really, throughout the process, position themselves as financially successful people. And then they'll try to get you.
I personally would find it completely bizarre if someone was sending me screenshots of their investment portfolio.
I wouldn't do that either, but maybe it's because I don't have the money to flaunt. I wouldn't do it either. I'm not particularly proud of mine, I would say. But
But to me, that's just so outside of like.
yeah,
I know that they're doing it to try to backstop their personality, but it just seems to me to be so outside of normal behavior. People might talk about how great their investments are, but to like show screenshots of the, after they've logged into their accounts or scans of statements just seems, I don't know. You're trying too hard to convince me.
yeah, yeah. I would agree.
Do you see issues with like? I know early on in the romance scams, because the scammers are almost always overseas, there were these really difficult communication times, like where the person claimed to be was never really the time zone when the person was available. Like, oh, I'm in Europe, but they're never available to chat during a European time zone window.
I think they work graveyard shifts because I never had that issue. I'm based in Pacific time, and it's never had an issue contacting. In fact, the person that I ended up like, I guess, going all the way with, or in terms of like carrying out this scam, was available during my hours. So I don't. If you're asking like if there was a lull because of the time zone differences, there wasn't.
Oh, interesting. Were there I tell people this less and less as a protection these days. Were there grammar issues, or was there English? Was it a pretty good use of English?
There were grammar issues. I think some of the things that we're saying were very obviously like a copy paste from Google Translate. However, it's not that you can't have like a conversation. It is a conversation, but there's just like those things. Also, I had the advantage of knowing what I was getting into.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, it was a lot more obvious. Hey, these are probably foreign actors. They also on the apps though position themselves as someone like someone who was born overseas. So I think to cover for that.
Yeah.
So I did notice the grammar. It didn't sound like they didn't sound like native English speakers. Yeah. But I think they cover for that pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying, "Oh, I grew up in Germany," or "I grew up in some other country," that's the reasoning why the grammar or the anecdotes aren't what we would normally expect to see. Even if the person's claiming to be, "Hey, I'm in San Diego when you're in Los Angeles," or something like that. That justifies it because they have a different upbringing. So. How did they introduce kind of the crypto element?
Yeah, so I think it really starts off from the profile or from that initial conversation of, if it is an app where you can answer certain prompts, they talk about being successful financially. Then they'll scatter in some, hey, you're so beautiful, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll ask like, what did you do today? I made $10,000 because of Bitcoin. And then a few days pass and like, hey, would you like to get involved? And like, I'm really doing well with this. I want to share it with you. I can teach you how to be as successful as I am. Actually funny because now that I think of it, I didn't think about this, but my scammer boyfriend, I don't have a better name for them, but they mentioned Bitcoin, but what I invested in was not Bitcoin at all. So there's a disconnect there now that I'm realizing. Yeah. I did actually another thing that makes them very tech savvy is I didn't mention this, I don't think. They have a fake crypto exchange platform. And so they'll eventually tell you, hey, this is like way better for what we're trying to do. You should use this. It's a foreign-based crypto exchange or trading platform. These usually do not have a presence on the not the dating apps, on the app stores or even like a Google search. And so that's another way for, I think, individuals to check out to see if whether it's a legitimate site or not. And then on the platform, of course, it's completely manipulated by them, right? So you're seeing huge returns, 100% returns in just a few minutes.
You're seeing 100% return on their platform when the crypto market's down 30%.
Yeah. And there's a reason for why, they're able to, I don't know, short whatever currency. But and the platform also has a 24/7 customer support. So actually, this was kind of a funny thing for me. I forgot my login credentials. And so I tried to log back in. I wasn't having any issues, and I was having issues. And I'm texting, the person on the other end saying I'm having issues. I'm running into issues, and he told me to go to support. And so after a few minutes, the person writing to me on the support line basically gave me my credentials, which from a legitimate platform, no one's going to send you, oh, by the way, this is your username and your password. You either have to go through a password reset or, they'll send it to your email, which they verified, but there was none of that. And so, my point in bringing that up was, though, it feels very real. You see the values change. If you look, the actual cryptocurrency values that they share on the platform reflect real-time values. So they're using some public API or, information to show that, hey, this is legitimate. But again, if you do a Google search or App Store search, the search engines don't index them.
Yeah, I've had a number of people who have contacted me because they're like, hey, I think I'm being scammed out of this, a crypto scam, and I have the money on this exchange. And never heard of that exchange, and I just Google that exchange and the word scam, and it's just like post after post after post of people saying, that this crypto exchange is a scam, or I run the domain through Whois, and the domain was created like 15 days ago. I'm like, I don't think you can be a leading cryptocurrency exchange when you've been around, 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks, I went through the same process too of looking at Whois, and I think the one I looked at was they had like the privacy controls on it, so I couldn't see. But that's also, I don't want to say is always a red flag, but it's again, if you add all the pieces together, I would not feel comfortable putting my money in that.
Yeah, and I suspect, as some of these scams are not being run by individuals but organized crime, they probably have been going out and buying domain names for years in plans of using them for things in the future, so that there is an age to the domain name, and it's not just, hey, it was created yesterday. No, it was created 3 years ago, and everyone's going to go, oh, well, then it must be legit.
Yeah, I actually have experience supporting that. So at Facebook, not on domains, but we did deal with a malicious actor that basically bought up a bunch of the generic Instagram handles. So things like Leaf or Autumn or Summer, and they just held onto them for years and years and years to build that legitimacy to gain followers, and then they would later sell them. So that does happen.
And so, do you know if your crypto scamming boyfriend was it? Do you know if it was organized crime or if he was just an individual and a couple of his friends?
So I didn't learn that they were likely tied to organized crime until after, much later. I don't think this is just one benign or just a one-off actor, just because actually this is another thing that I mentioned. So the way that crypto remittance works is that you have an address. So think of this as your like bank account number or equivalent to your bank account number. And so on the exchange, I sent the money to the address that was specified, and it was $100 worth of crypto. What I did then was I searched that address on Etherscan to kind of look at the transaction history of that particular address.
Mhm.
And in total, I think there was like something over 130,000 US dollars that had been moved through this wallet that was supposedly just tied to me.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't send that money. So it gives you an idea of the scale at which they're operating. And so I don't think it's just one or two, friends just trying to have fun or, run like a small time scam. I do think it's a lot more organized, actually, especially with the website, the 24/7 support. Yeah, and as other folks in the industry are doing their own investigations, we are learning that it is a lot more organized than we thought.
Yeah. Do you know where the scam was being run out of?
I don't. I only know what I've been reading afterwards. So I have read that they are likely coming out of Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all I know so far.
Yeah.
It's Southeast Asia, but it's a lot of, I think, yeah, organized crime that has base in Southeast Asia is what I've heard. No, to this day.
I know that like different types of fraud can sometimes be geographic in terms of this is just what what the crime community in that geography knows how to do, and they just continue to excel on it. And other ones are pretty much non-discriminatory; they'll operate from anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, we do see different fraud coming out of different regions. And, we talk a lot at Sift about the fraud economy. And what we mean by a fraud economy is that it is a very sophisticated network of cyber criminals, and they're coordinating with each other. They have turf wars. And I saw this firsthand at Facebook as well, where you have certain scam rings or spam fraud rings targeting certain regions, but
Mm-hmm.
avoiding certain regions. And you can all see this on the back end where they're like, oh, we're not going to target users based in XYZ countries, right? Because my theory on that is because they are kind of honoring each other's boundaries, I think.
Yeah.
So the fraud economy, it is very organized. They coordinate with each other. They buy and sell different types of services and skills that they have. We see this in dark web and Telegram forums and such.
Yeah, I had a recent interview with Jack Whitaker, who has done research into like fake pet scam, fake pet sites.
Yeah,
and to him, it was really interesting that you're talking about the scam economy. Is like the web developers that would make the site.
Yeah.
They do have a legitimate web development business that they do, and one of their customers just happens to be the pet scam ring.
Yeah.
And so there's this weird kind of everybody has their specialty. You have the people that know how to launder the gift cards from iTunes. Then you get the people who know how to do the Google Play gift cards, and that everybody kind of has their specialty, and there's this loose affiliation of how they work together. It's pretty pretty crazy and scary.
Yeah. Well, and and they have their own sort of honor amongst thieves and code of ethics. So we do see in Telegram forums, we see people being ostracized by the community. If you're a scammer that scams scammers, you're shunned by your peers or colleagues. I don't know what you would call them, but they do, have this sort of honor code amongst themselves.
You're allowed to scam the rich people, but just not us.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you see, kind of taking a step back, and I'll bring this through. What do you see as where things are going with scams in general? Like, if you'd asked me, 5 years ago, I would always say, get on a video chat with a person as long as it's not, as long as they're not having quote unquote technical difficulties. If they get on a video chat, you at least know that you're dealing with someone. And if that face doesn't match what you saw on the profile, end it. But with the kind of, how close I'm not asking you this personally, but deep fakes are going to be are no longer 20 years in the future. They're, the Tom Cruise deep fake, that's one thing. That's a lot of work, and you've got actors and voice artists. But how long is it before that stuff starts to become accessible to the organized crime, and telling people, oh, just jump on a video chat is no longer going to be a safe thing to do?
I think we're more than halfway there where, they do exist. I come from Facebook, and we're dealing with misinfo and things like that. So you do have the deep fakes. I think there was one of Obama a few years back that looked pretty good.
Yeah.
I think
but there's definitely a difference between a staged, we had 3 weeks to build this deep fake, and a real-time video chat.
Yeah, this is where I see companies moving more toward upping their authentication for real users. And so, another big move that we made at Sift is, really pushing for passwordless authentication using biometrics, right? And so there are biometric ID tools where you can tell if something is fake or generated.
So as a point of clarification for me, would this be the sort of thing when the user creates an account, they can upload a profile picture, but they actually have to, within the app, take a photo of themselves within the app, and then it can kind of compare the two?
Or, having users, obviously you don't want to do this to 100% of your users because that would insult a lot of your well-meaning users. But just understanding, again, if this user has also had 100 other accounts created from the same IP address in the last 30 minutes, I'm not saying that's the criteria people should follow, but let's say that is a highly fraudulent signal. Okay, maybe for those users, we want to force them through this verification process that says, okay, I'm not talking about like the hold up your face, because there's a lot of caveats to that, I'll say. Sure. I don't think they're matching necessarily whether something's authentic or not. Authentic meaning a live person. But you can say, okay, we'll put them through like a Face ID type of scan, or a facial scan, or a movement, having them move up and down and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely helps weed out the guy who runs 50 accounts and everybody on the account looks different than the actor.
Yeah, I will say the industry, we're in a tricky space though, because you want to balance the right amount of friction that you throw at, again, your well-meaning users. You don't want them to be like, why you feel violated, right? You don't want them feeling violated. You want to get the right people, the people that are going to wreak havoc on your platform. Again, like with the right tooling and signals, I do believe it's achievable, but I do think that that's where it's going to have to move, especially with the sophistication. Something we haven't talked about was the rise of synthetic identity fraud. Yeah. That's when people are using components of real individuals, social security numbers, to look like they're Chris Parker coming from, I don't know, like New York. And that information actually may belong to you, but it's in the hands of the wrong person. And so how do you get better at verifying that it's the actual Chris or Jane opening an account or opening a profile? I think that's where we're headed next.
And I think some of the challenges, particularly with credit and identity, is all these things were designed well before the modern technology and the thought that people would actually try to create fake identities and steal identities. And, the trust was almost implied in the way a lot of these old platforms were built. And now you're having to build platforms with less trust involved in the platform and being a little more skeptical about, is this really who they claim to be, whether it's an API handshake or if it's a person using an app. It's a little less trust these days.
Yeah.
And it's probably necessitated. So as we wrap up here, are there any particular resources that Sift has that where people can keep abreast of what the latest is in the fraud landscape?
Yeah, if people are curious about understanding, we put out a blog a few months ago on pig butchering. It outlines the step-by-step process. It has pictures or examples of pictures, screenshots, things like that. If anyone's curious to take a peek and see if it matches up to what they're dealing with, if they're suspicious of someone they're talking to. We also have our recent index report that we issue quarterly. All of those are available on our website, sift.com, if you'd like to take a look and learn more.
And we'll definitely, for those that are listening that don't want to try to figure out how to find it on the website, we'll link to those in the show notes and make it easy clickable for everybody. Is there any way people can find you and more about Sift online, social media accounts?
Yeah, so I am. So this is always a balance for me too, to my online life. But
if you don't want to, that's fine.
No, totally fine. LinkedIn, I would say, is the best way to contact me. I think if you just search for Jane Lee Sift, I think you should. I'm the only Jane Lee at Sift, so that should be the way to get in touch.
And then Sift's social media presence?
I should know this better. Give me 1 second. It's linkedin.com /get Sift. And then we have the @GetSift Twitter handle.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Jane.
Thank you.